You have to be ready for two types of conversations if you're going into a listing appointment or some type of consultation altogether. The majority of people are going to want really easy to understand tables and charts and graphs, keeping current matters type of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or something that you can pull off of your MLS that is broadly showcasing the market that's going to back up whatever's coming out of your mouth. And then for maybe 10, 15, 20% of these conversations, you're going to have to really get analytical.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd be prepared to go both ways. I always brought, if I got somebody in front of me who's an engineer, a Pfizer type of thinker, back when I was selling, because we had some Pfizer folks
Yeah,
where I
yeah.
was, selling in that market. I would always have my laptop with me because I'm like, oop, we've got Mr. Analytical here. We've got Mrs. Spreadsheet. I'm going to want to go deeper and spend a half hour getting them comfortable, knowing that I've got the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to actually take on the deal and put them in a good position, because they need to understand how you're getting to a price range. They need to understand the strategy behind why we're going out at that number. And because they're just seeing a whole bunch of, headlines and basic information about the market. And if they're an engineer analytical type, they're going to want to go deep on it.
What I found was one of the most effective charts to use is, and I got taught this from one of my early coaches on in the business about 10 years ago. You give them all the data, you show them all the sales, but then give them a line item report and show the trends and the prices that are actually transacting. And then you can identify that. Now, you got to get your pen out. You got to mark it up a little bit. So, for example, you see, here's all the active listings, and we see there's a grouping right now, and they're priced at, let's call it 425. And there's 3 or 4 of them there. And then we don't see anything priced until 500. Now, a lot of the comparables are showing that your home's going to be priced around this 450 or so range. So there's some opportunity there. But we can see that there's nothing else that's transacting. You got these 425 sales, stuff around 450, and then there's nothing that's moving until you get above 5. And we can agree you're not above 5 based on these sales. So you don't want to go in that 475 range because that's kind of a dead man zone. And those are local trends that if you spend the 10 or 15 minutes to prep for the listing appointment, you're going to be able to articulate that clearly. And that's something anyone can understand. And I'm a big fan of visuals, like you said, and even just kind of marking them up and walking them through the thought process. And also be careful not to use like jargon. And you got to use stuff that they can understand, whether it's the super analytical type or think about, your typical person. I mean, they may not know anything about real estate despite being really educated. I found that across the board with doctors, attorneys, even financial advisors. So the more you can break it down into simple terms that have meaning, the better off you're going to be, and the better off your clientele are going to be.
All right, before we go, Tom, we gotta talk about these GDP numbers this week. U.S. GDP rose 2.9% in the fourth quarter. It's more than expected, even as these recession fears loom. So the expectations were 2.8% on GDP. The Fed wants us to be under 2.8 on these reads. We were above. We were at 2.9. But they don't want us to be in the negatives, right? Because the Fed wants to be the hero where it's like, okay, we don't go into the negatives, we don't go into a recession, but we don't want to beat expectations because we want to show that we are slowing this economy down. What is the GDP, first of all?
I think this is important, yes.
And then how's this number, impact us?
So the GDP, it's the monetary value of goods and services
bought by end users. So the person who actually is purchasing the product, whatever
Gross
the cost of that
product
is, right? Now it's also it's the user. It has to be produced in the subject country, right? So U.S. gross domestic product would be the stuff that the U.S. produces and what it costs when it gets sold to the end user over a period of time. So this usually gets evaluated quarter by quarter. So it's basically the retail value of the items or services that are produced or given in a country over a period of time.
And when we're talking about this particular number, 2.9% in quarter four, it's a backward looking number. It's like a lot of the real estate closing information that you look like it's lagging. It's old data, right? And so it's not completely indicative of where we're going to end up at the end of quarter one. Look at where this came out this week. It's like October was 4 months ago, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in a totally different place than we were in October. Some of the things that are fighting this number, jobless claims continue to go down. There was a Wall Street Journal article that showed like these companies that have less than 250 employees, they keep hiring. How often are you and I, and even with housing being in a recession, how many brokers and team leaders do we talk to where it's like, I'm putting up another job, and I'm putting up another ad for another position. I'm putting up another position. Well, small businesses across the board are driving hiring right now.
Mm-hmm.
While some of these big tech companies and everything, they've been laying off. But jobless claims fell last week, while durable good orders increased sharply in December. That's mainly due to these aircraft numbers, which were off the chart. I don't know if that caught your attention at all. These aircraft orders are like enormous. But yeah, so 186,000 on jobless claims. The expectation was that they're going to be closer to 210,000 on that number. And so these are numbers that are keeping GDP and some of these other things higher than, the overall economy, higher than experts would like, so that the Fed would react with maybe a pause when they meet next week. We're going to have a whole bunch, obviously, to talk about next week, because the Fed's meeting
big deal
Tuesday, Wednesday.